Hello again, and welcome to our East African webinar series, part 3. My name is Tõnis Pehter, and I am project manager in Enterprise Estonia. Today is our last stop of planned 3 webinars, and we will talk about how to do business in Tanzania. And like in last 2 webinars, we have guests from Stepchange Africa to give us the overview. But just one thing before that, please use actively the Q&A section, and our guests will answer to the questions in the end of the webinar. But now, without further ado, this time I will give the word over to Andrew Herweg. Andrew, if you are ready, then take it over.
Fantastic, and thank you, Tõnis, and good afternoon to everyone in today's audience. So as Tõnis said, this is the 3rd part of a 3-part series on doing business in East Africa, and today we'll do a high-level overview, but also do a deep dive through 3 particular sectors we think that it's ripe for opportunity. So the agenda today is quite similar if you attended our other 2 webinars, but if this is the first time you're joining us, I'm just going to give you sort of a quick rundown of what you can expect over the next 90 minutes. After this period, I'm going to give a short introduction, a little bit more who Stepchange Africa are, as well as who will be my colleagues joining today's call. That'll be followed up by a high-level country overview for Tanzania. We're going to do this because it provides a lot of insight and also gives you a lot of visualization to where particular opportunities actually are across the country. We'll then do a deep dive into specific sectors. Those sectors include ICT, agriculture, and manufacturing. If you happen not to be involved in those 3 sectors, that's all right. We will actually provide a little bit more detail in some other supplementary sectors. And then also we will share with you the presentation afterwards that actually has additional information in regards to tourism, services, and several other sectors. So it will be quite wide-ranging what we'll cover today, but we'll do a specific deep dive in those 3 particular sectors. We'll then go into what we like to call as the real deal. The real deal is what is it sort of above the surface and beneath the surface. So there's a lot of things that seem quite obvious doing business in Tanzania from afar, but also in person. But what is it sort of beneath the surface, and what are sort of the challenges and opportunities? And that's what my colleague Amyn will cover a little bit later during today's presentation. Then we'll be joined by our special guest today, Banu Pratap from ALCPA. And he'll give you great insights on sort of tax compliance and other information on doing business in Tanzania, followed by a question and answer period. So as Tõnis pointed out, we love to hear your questions. So if a question comes to mind, do not hesitate to ask it in the chat function, and we'll get to it during the question and answer period. If we happen not to get to during the question and answer period, that's not a problem. Some of the members who've joined us today will stay on for an extra few minutes afterwards, and we're happy to answer all the questions you have. So don't worry if we don't get to it during that period. Then finally, we'll provide sort of next steps and key contacts for you to action upon and start building your business, hopefully in Tanzania. So now let me just tell you a little bit more about who will be speaking today during the presentation. First off, a little bit more about myself. I'm a co-founder, managing partner of Stepchange Africa. So my background is heavily in the business development, marketing strategy, and international partnerships. Prior to being a co-founder of Stepchange Africa, I was also an entrepreneur for several years in manufacturing, fast-moving consumer goods, agriculture, and mobile tech across East Africa is where I was based, but I was doing work across entire sort of region of sub-Saharan Africa. Then my colleague who will join me today, that is Amyn Esmail. And then just a brief introduction to him. He is a finance expert and well-versed in sort of financial products, as well as agriculture, commodities trading. And he heads up 2 specific parts of our business at Stepchange Africa in terms of the export and access to international markets, as well as helping with the fundraising portion of the business for our clients. And then last but not least, our special guest today will be Banu Pratap. He is from ALCPA, And he is an expert in terms of tax, regulatory, and compliance, and he'll provide a little bit more information to his background when he speaks a little bit later today during our presentation. And then finally, Stepchange Africa. So Stepchange Africa is an organization that works with seed to Series A startups and established SMEs that are expanding, investing, and operating across sub-Saharan Africa. We offer 4 particular sort of unique areas of support. One is for export, and that's through the whole entire process of getting the certifications to giving access to international markets. We also provide a fundraising and transaction advisory from the very beginning of getting your data room in order to actually sort of closing that funding round. We also offer technical service in terms of corporate governance, sales and marketing, and HR. And last but not least, we also offer a virtual C-suite where a member of the team will actually come and join your company and help plug the gaps, whether that's as a chief financial officer, a chief marketing officer, operations officer, and several other positions. And what we'll do is being able to sort of fix specific areas within your company, as well as we also heavily focus on knowledge transfer, just to make sure the work that we've done not only plugs the gaps, but sort of ensures long-term success. So without further ado, let's jump into Tanzania. So Tanzania is really strategically placed. It's at the crossroads of East and Southern Africa. And so much so, it's actually the gateway to several landlocked countries. It actually has the largest population of the whole entire East African community. And that's quite important, particularly if you look at more higher demographics. Tanzania is ripe for opportunity. It is actually has a population about 10 million more of it's sort of the second closest in terms of population in the East African community, and that's Kenya, who I'm referring to. In terms of official languages, it's Swahili and English, but English is really the language of doing business. But just to put it further into context, that the comprehension, understanding of English is very high in urban centers. So I'm speaking about Dar es Salaam, Dodoma, Arusha, Mwanza. But as you get into more rural areas, the comprehension does drop. So it's highly recommended that you, of course, hire locally, you train locally, but also sort of spend the time learning Swahili as well. In terms of sort of where does it all happen? Well, the political capital is Dodoma, and the region itself holds about a little more than 2 million people. So that's the region. Particularly talking about the city of Dodoma itself, we're looking at a little over 400,000 in terms of population. So Dodoma is going through a vast amount of transformation. This is because even though it's been sort of the nominated sort of capital for quite an extensive period of time, it's only recently that embassies, government ministries, and higher volumes of personnel have actually been relocating from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma. So it's an area that's going under a large amount of transformation. And we sort of expect that to be an area of a hotbed of activity across a number of different sectors in the sort of the coming years ahead. And then getting towards the end, currency is the Tanzanian shilling. And Dar es Salaam is the economic capital. And what do we mean by what is an economic capital? Dar es Salaam, with the expansion of their airport, also with the location of the port, it is the epicenter of where business activities take place. And my colleague Amyn will go further in detail of sort of what are all the opportunities available in Dar es Salaam. Now, what to know? Let's talk about key indicators. From a GDP perspective, that's the second highest GDP in the East African community after Kenya, and they clock in about 63 billion. Where does it compare to Uganda? If you attend one of the earlier webinars, it's almost 30 billion more. So there's quite a difference between sort of the higher end in terms of GDP with Kenya and Tanzania, in terms of the smaller countries or younger countries in terms of development. I'm talking about Burundi, South Sudan, Uganda, and Rwanda. In terms of the GDP growth rate, we're looking at a little over 4%. And actually, if you're not aware, Tanzania has actually had some of the highest growth rates over the last half decade. And that's partly been driven by the extractives industry and number of discoveries in terms of LPG. What's exciting, particularly with Tanzania, is actually their GDP per capita. If you've been paying attention to the news, or if this is the first time, um, Tanzania actually just recently became a classified middle income country. So that shows you that there's increasing spending power, and there's also seeing a growth of a middle class. And that middle class is only about 10% of the population, but it's a growing middle class with more spending power and sort of more wants and needs and demands, and those need to all be catered to. And for those who are not aware in the audience, so what's classified as a middle income country, you're looking at the GDP per capita of anything over 1,000 US dollars. And then lastly, just touching upon inflation, the reason why you're seeing so much growth is basically the growth rate is a lot higher than inflation. So it provides a lot more opportunity for infrastructure developments, access to capital, and numerous other resources to be at the government's disposal. So that's what really sort of lays a nice strong foundation doing business in Tanzania. Continuing on, so what are some other important rates to take in consideration? We're looking at the VAT. We're looking at an 18% tax rate. From there, it's a little bit more expensive than Kenya, but it's cheaper than Uganda and Rwanda. But at the end of the day, you can just think that Tanzania is sort of in the middle ground from a VAT perspective. Looking at the Social Security rate, the Social Security rate is high compared to its EAC community members. The reason of that is just because of the development and also the socialism has been a huge focus of Tanzania since its sort of independence as a country. So 15% is actually contributed by the company, and there's actually additional 5% that's contributed by the employee. In terms of the USD exchange rate, a little over 2,300 Tanzanian shillings for a US dollar. And corporate tax rate, that's quite standard. They're at a 30%. So it puts them on par for the rest of sub-Saharan Africa and sort of most other sort of countries across the world. So now let's talk about sort of the import and export and the relationship with the European Union. In terms of let's talk about sort of the negative. In terms of key takeaways, in terms of exports going to the European Union, is that you actually seen since 2017, there's actually been a significant drop-off in terms of animal-related products and food stuff. But on the other hand, you've actually seen a very strong growth in regards to value-add agricultural products, but also the extractive industries. And as you can tell, what I pointed out earlier is that Tanzania has actually had a vast amount of growth, even though they've sort of fallen back in certain aspects. The extractives industry is just a huge driver of the overall growth within the country, and also in terms of tax collection too. Looking at the import side of things, it's actually quite consistent what we're seeing. If you're looking at sort of anywhere from plant-based products to overall machinery, you're not really seeing high fluctuations in regards to that. Most of it's remained stable, but there actually has been some areas of growth, and that's where we're looking at sort of machinery, base metals, and plant-based products. And then what we've identified at Stepchange are what are sort of the growth markets in terms of imports over the next 5 years, really looking at sort of the refined petroleum, machinery and metals, vegetable products, and pharmaceuticals. So I'm just going to provide a little bit more context in the pharmaceuticals, particularly as we're still in the midst of COVID, or if you being in Estonia, you're slowly sort of being allowed to, there's a little bit more sort of back to normality happening. But across sub-Saharan Africa, because they lack their capacity to produce pharmaceutical goods, particularly vaccines, it's one of the things that the opening is going to be a lot slower in terms of the economies and getting back to normal. So in terms of the pharmaceuticals, you can look at simple pharmaceuticals such as pain relievers to something more complex as vaccine development and production. There's a huge opportunity. And this opportunity doesn't only expand within Tanzania, but if you attend the previous webinars, or if this is your first time, it's actually been reported that we've shared that in Kenya and Uganda, there's a huge opportunity. So you can actually look at Tanzania as a base, and you can export to the surrounding countries, and there's a sizable demand if you're able to sort of build up a formalized structure, systems and processes, and build out quality products. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Amyn Esmail, and he's going to take you through sector opportunities as well as giving you sort of a hands-on look to what's the real deal and the challenges and opportunities of doing business in Tanzania. So without further ado, I hand it over to Amyn.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues from Estonia. Andrew, thank you for the introduction and the information provided so far. Tanzania, like most of East Africa, presents a lot of opportunities. And as Andrew mentioned, we're going to look at three key sectors: ICT, agriculture, and manufacturing. In Tanzania, ICT is a sleeping giant, and there's a lot of innovation that's moving around. The country has built 18 innovation hubs across the country in Dar es Salaam, Mwanza, and Arusha. These innovation hubs include one of particular interest to me, the World Food Programme Innovation Hub, which is essentially working with the Tanzanian government to solve one of the UN SDGs for eliminating hunger, or zero hunger. Another hub of particular interest is the Bani Hub, which is coordinating science and technology. The innovation in ICT in Tanzania links to a lot of the growth areas around the country, and it links into agriculture, financial services, healthcare, and clean tech. Now, of particular interest is the agriculture, and a lot of companies are coming up, especially in the post-COVID era or during the COVID pandemic, that focus in on fruit and vegetable deliveries, and really connecting the consumer in Tanzania or in Dar es Salaam or Arusha to markets to farmers in different parts of the country. So it's really that concept of food to table, and these and the opportunity exists to link farmers in Tanzania to markets in Estonia or other parts of the EU. Financial services in East Africa is growing and it is very innovative. And as we've spoken in our past webinar series about the innovation that we've seen in Kenya and Uganda. From a financial services point of view, there's a lot of consumer-based lending and behavioral lending through mobile money platforms, remittances from peer-to-peer, etc. Telemedicine is an area of growth across East Africa, and we're seeing a lot of growth and opportunity in this space during this COVID pandemic and beyond. Clean tech, with the the access to limited power, for example, in the country, as with most of the of sub-Saharan Africa, companies such as a Kenyan company, Copa, are springing up to provide financing and access to solar panels for rural villages and consumers across the country. And one good thing to note is that mobile data is the cheapest in East Africa, rather in East Africa, and 1 gig of data costs about 13 US cents per gig, so that's quite affordable. Andrew, if you can move to the next slide. As I mentioned, agriculture is an area of particular interest to Stepchange Africa, and we see this as a growth area, considering the food security issues and the conversation globally around food security. Maize is Tanzania's largest crop, and there's a big export opportunity regionally. 67% of Tanzanians are engaged in the agriculture sector, mainly are subsistence farmers, as we've seen in Uganda and Kenya. That being said, there is lots of arable land and an ability to grow into various crops of interest to different parts of the world. agriculture contributes 22% of Tanzania's GDP. Now, some of the opportunities that we're seeing in agriculture is, oil seed and nut processing, especially for the export markets, floriculture and horticulture. There's a large market for African flowers, for example, into the European Union. Fish and aquaculture, not just deep sea fishing, but you're seeing a lot of aquaculture projects for the cultivation of tilapia, for example. There's fruit and vegetable processing, and avocado oil. It has been of particular interest to Tanzanian farmers and to Tanzanian industries. And one thing that's not noted here, but I think it's quite important, is spice production. Tanzania has a favorable climate and for growing spices, including vanilla, cardamom, ginger, and cinnamon. So that's something for us to particularly keep in mind. Andrew, can you move on to the next slide? Now, when we talk about manufacturing, as Andrew mentioned, Tanzania has just become a middle-income country, ahead of the initial projections by the government in 2018 that they wanted to achieve that goal by 2025. So a few years early, and that demonstrates the growth and the ability for Tanzania to, for Tanzania to become a good investment opportunity. The manufacturing industry is small, but it's growing about 4% year on year, and focused on simple consumer goods, food, tobacco, furniture, and it contributes half of Tanzania's annual revenue collection. Now, the country is rich in resources, and this provides an opportunity for growth. Whether we look at linking agriculture to manufacturing, Tanzania grows cotton, and there's opportunities for textile manufacturing. It produces iron for steel manufacturing. There's opportunities in the dairy sector for the development of the dairy industry into various consumer products. There's opportunity, as I spoke earlier, about the aquaculture and deep sea fishing industries, and there's opportunity for further processing, not only for the Tanzanian market but for export markets. And one thing I'll mention later on in this presentation is that Tanzania is part of the SADC, the Southern African Development Community, as well as the East African Community. So when looking at manufacturing Tanzania, it's important for us not to only look at the local opportunity, but look at the regional opportunity and some of the bigger markets being Kenya and South Africa, as well as the opportunity to export into the EU and beyond. Just to put things into context, and so that you're able to visualize where the opportunities lie, we have a map of Tanzania. I'll start with Dar es Salaam being the commercial capital. The opportunity here is in small-scale manufacturing, financial services, and infrastructure. And moving towards Arusha, there's opportunities in agriculture, tourism, and small-scale manufacturing. Mwanza is fisheries, agriculture, and manufacturing. The north central and northeast Tanzania, this is where the mining hub is, and then in Dodoma, the political capital, there's small-scale manufacturing, leisure, and hospitality. Excuse me. Now let's look at the real deal. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities in the country? First of all, let's look at the progress that Tanzania has made. I spoke earlier about how, and Andrew echoed the same thing, how Tanzania has become a middle-income country. That in itself shows the progress that the country is making a number of years ahead of the initial government projections. Air Tanzania has been upgraded by the Tanzanian government, which is the national carrier, and the airports have been upgraded and improved. Tourism is growing, not only in the beach resorts of outside of Dar es Salaam, but Zanzibar, as well as the game reserves. There is a lot of tourism that comes into Tanzania from various parts of the world, and a lot of global resort chains such as the Serena, Four Seasons, Hilton, Hyatt, etc., have presence in the country. There's enhancement of the seaports, and Tanzania has 3 seaports. What are some of the challenges that we're seeing in Tanzania? Like most of sub-Saharan Africa, there's poor infrastructure in the rural areas. The road network, for example, isn't as developed as you would see in Europe. During this COVID-19 pandemic, there have been limited health measures against COVID, and one needs to be very mindful of that when planning any activities right now. And youth unemployment is very high, and there's a very large informal market. So what I mean by that is trade doesn't happen in the as one would see in the European Union. It's a lot of cash trade, for example, that takes place on an ad hoc basis. What are some of the untapped opportunities? The Tanzanian population is growing, and as such, that presents a large opportunity for us or for anyone to tackle that market. The government of Tanzania's investment is small, but it has a growing middle class, and that's about 10% of the population. So as I said, with the high population growth and the growing middle class, there is an opportunity for businesses to get involved into areas such as ICT or manufacturing that targets this segment of the population. And then financial services, be it formal financial services, where Tanzania has has presence of a lot of international banks, such as ABSA, which is formerly part of the Barclays Group, Standard Bank, which is called Stanbic from South Africa, as well as some international banks. But there is opportunity for in the innovation around the financial services space. Now, some of the unforeseen obstacles is corruption, and one needs to be very mindful of this when investing in East Africa. Climate change, especially when looking around the agriculture space, there's been a lack of rainfall, and this has impacted GDP. Some of the underlying challenges in Tanzania, as I mentioned earlier, corruption is a challenge. Tanzania scores poorly in the Transparency International's Corruption Index. That being mind, it's not a barrier to doing business, but when planning your business, one needs to keep that in mind. Decision making in Tanzania is relatively slow, so you would need to have patience and perseverance. But again, I wouldn't use that as an excuse not to enter the market, because there are a lot of other opportunities and a lot of opportunities that one could tap into. Power, like most of East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, is an issue, and a lot of, especially when looking at manufacturing, please consider alternative sources of power, such as standby generators, solar, or other renewable forms. Items of value. So it's important to protect goods, services, property, to reduce theft. The country is, while crime is not a large issue, it's always good to have insurance and other measures in place so that your investment is secure. Tanzania has an admirable culture, and then creating a culture of ethics and values across and within your company. This is always important, and businesses that establish need to pay attention and dedicate time to building a culture and training the workforce. And linking to my earlier point in terms of protecting items of value, it's always important to hire security, which in Swahili the term is called an askari, to protect goods and to protecting business premises. Now, what are some of the unique opportunities in Tanzania? As I mentioned, Tanzania has 3 deep water ports, and that's in Dar es Salaam, Tanga, and Mtwara. These ports offer great access, and especially for both import and export opportunities. Tanzania, as some of you probably know or don't know, is the gateway to 6 landlocked sub-Saharan African countries, such as Zambia, Malawi, and Uganda. As I mentioned earlier, maize is one of the largest crops that are grown in Tanzania, and maize is traded around the East African community, especially into Kenya and Uganda. The Tanzanian government has created several economic zones, and these economic zones offer incentives in terms of tax dispensations, duty exemptions, etc. There's a focus on international business and to do more joint ventures with Tanzanian businesses. So that's an opportunity for Europeans to look at when entering the Tanzanian markets. Some of the things that one should be mindful of when looking to invest in Tanzania is that there is a lack of skilled labor force. So make sure that you incorporate in-house training programs, as I mentioned earlier, for your staff to ensure that you have the desired levels of efficiency. English is the language of business, but comprehension of English drops dramatically outside the urban areas. So it's important to learn the local language, Swahili. Tanzania is a safe and secure country. There's rarely security issues in comparison to neighboring countries. And there's a new leadership which provides cautious optimism for the next several years. What to know. 17% of Tanzania's global exports are destined for the EU, and this includes spices such as vanilla and other products. According to the IMF, trade between the EU and Tanzania amounted to about $1 billion in 2016, and this amount is growing. There are areas for growth and expansion beyond Dar es Salaam, and this includes into smaller towns, but growing towns such as Arusha, Mwanza, and Dodoma. As I mentioned, agriculture is an area of particular interest for us at Stepchange, and that's echoed by the fact that Tanzania has about 44 million hectares of arable fertile land, and it has 1 to 2 growing seasons depending on the commodity and in the particular region. And as I earlier mentioned, Tanzania is a member of the EAC and the SADC, so there are opportunities to look both in East Africa as well as south into Southern Africa. Now, let me pass it over to Banu Pratap to give his views on doing business in Tanzania. Banu, over to you. Hello, Banu.
Well, it seems like we're having some connection difficulties with Banu, but hopefully we'll be able to get him back on in the next 10, 15 minutes. Oh, here's Banu right too. Hi, Banu.
Sorry, I dropped out,
No problem.
but I was able to catch back soon. I mean, thank you very much for passing on to me. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for showing interest in Tanzania. I'm Bhanu Pratap, and I've worked widely in Africa, spent a lot of time in Zambia, Tanzania, Rwanda. So I'd like to share my experience of working in Tanzania with you. So first of all, Tanzania is a huge land with a lot of untapped potential. It has attractive, top-rated tourist destinations like Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the highest mountain in Africa. It has Serengeti National Park with its endless grasslands. It has Zanzibar with its serene beaches and also a lot of untouched natural beauty. Tanzania is also rich in resources, and it has some of its biggest mines and processing operations which are located in the country. Tanzania is also leapfrogged in technology in many spheres. There are a lot of places where Tanzania is far advanced. It was too backward, but it has come in line with the rest of the world, so while technology is concerned. So with the scarcity of time, I may not be able to do justice to Tanzania. And I'm sure you can easily find about the specific information about Tanzania from our dear friend Google. So what I want to achieve in this short time is to share with you few leading pointers about living in Tanzania and doing business in Tanzania. So first of all, Africa is not a country. It's a huge continent which is made up of 50 plus unique countries. And Tanzania is a very different country located in Africa. It's different, absolutely different from across the continent, Nigeria, and it's even different from its neighbors, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda. So when you come to Tanzania, please do not come to Tanzania with any historical baggage. Tanzania is not just Dar and Dodoma. That's where majority of the business deals happens, maybe. But it's a huge country. In fact, Dar es Salaam, which is the commercial capital, and Dodoma, which is the administrative capital, they make only 10% of Tanzania. Country is huge. I would suggest be prepared to embrace the unique local culture of Tanzania. Please invest your time in a little deeper understanding of the language and culture of Tanzania. Kiswahili is a simple language with very minimal grammatical rules, widely spoken not only in Tanzania, but the wider Eastern Africa. Bureaucracy and corruption is there. There is no way hiding it. These things are present. Things like permits, licenses may take more time than is what is written on paper, and your costs could increase. So be prepared for these eventualities. But I can say by nature, Tanzanians are peace-loving and hardworking people. And if you're able to embrace the culture and be part of them, there is a solution to everything. just an example, there was a major leadership change in Tanzania recently. The president of the country died in office, but the transition was absolutely smooth, as if nothing has happened. The main regulatory authorities in Tanzania are TRA, which is the Tanzania Revenue Authority, equivalent of the tax department, and BRELA, which is the company regulator. Both serve through online platforms. The taxes in Tanzania are simple and straightforward on paper. There is VAT, which is charged on goods and services which you sell. There is income tax, and then there are various payroll taxes, which is payee, SDL, which is skill development levy, and then there is also pension fund contributions, which is social security contributions to NSSF. There is also withholding tax and various other levies. My golden advice on tax planning has always been to be tax compliant. Please understand the law and follow it. There could be certain challenges of doing business in Tanzania, like getting credit or finance at the right price could be a challenge. Banks may demand high collateral as security, and the interest rate could also be high. Also, if you plan to give credit to your customers, there may be a need to put an effective control or a follow-up system in place. So be prepared for this. Historically, there has been an FX risk because the economy is an import economy. But of late, say the last 3 years, the currency has been very stable. Then getting the right talent and the skill at an acceptable cost could be a challenge. And hence, you should invest not only in training and development, which goes without saying, but also in employee engagement. It's very important that you supervise and engage with your employees and give them enough scope for development. There is also a risk of fraud and security. Although it's very low as compared to the rest of Africa or even the neighboring countries. But there is definitely a need of some basic control and a need to put those in place to avoid leakages. This is very much avoidable. So that's all from my side. Please keep your business venture simple, and maybe some closing words. In fact, 2 closing words in Kiswahili. Karibu Tanzania, welcome to Tanzania, and asante sana, thank you very much. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Banu, for that. Very insightful, very, very honest and straightforward. I really appreciate that. And hopefully for the audience, everyone was able to sort of take those words to note and sort of use them as you sort of hopefully grow and expand your business in Tanzania. So now we're going to move on to the question and answer period for today. So let me just see. Sorry about that. Amyn, I might have to ask you, I'm not seeing the Q&A come through. I'm not sure if you have access to that.
I do, Andrew. So do you want me to just to talk, read out the questions?
Yes, if you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, so the first one is, how would you summarize the mining sector in Tanzania? What are the opportunities there for consulting service providers from the EU? The second question is, what would you suggest to a mining sector consulting company who would like to provide mineral exploration, mining engineering, and environmental services to the Tanzanian mining sector, and from where to start and how to get the foot in the door. How well developed is the payments behavior for both private and public sector? Do clients usually pay invoices in time, or are there delays usual part of the business culture? What to expect and prepare for? How is the situation with corruption in Tanzania? What to expect and prepare for? And working as mining sector consultants may require visiting and work in rural remote areas. How is security situation and what regions to avoid? What security measures should be taken when venturing out of the capital? Now, I think what I'll do, and then Banu, if I could ask you also to jump in here, just being because you're on the ground and you do business in Tanzania. I'll mention a few things about just the overall behavior, and then Banu, I'd ask you to jump in and add some more detail. Let me start off with payments, and as Banu mentioned, you know, if credit is given, then measures need to be put into place to secure your receivable. And this could be in various forms, most simply post-dated checks, but there are also various Pan-African insurance companies, such as export trade insurance, and which essentially provides security for any receivables. Banu, I'm sure there are other measures that you've had to take, or rather put in place, being on the ground, and I would invite you to share that with the audience in a few minutes. I guess when it comes down to looking at the opportunities in the mining sector, I am not a mining expert. However, there are various resources that we can link you to that can outline some of the more some of the areas of focus in mining, and we can definitely be that conduit to connect to you. You know, from a consulting point of view and looking at the opportunities, I can definitely speak to one area which is of particular interest, and that's the development consulting. Like I said, there is a lot of growth in various sectors such as agriculture, and given the fact that the bulk of the farmers in Tanzania are smallholder or subsistence farmers, there is interest from the development community to improve livelihoods and to grow. And this definitely is an opportunity for the European community to come into Tanzania and work with the development partners to develop this space. There's also an opportunity to look at the financial services space, business development, growth, etc. And you know, and then the last question I think was working in the mining sector. And I think let me hand over then to Banu with his local experience to add in terms of more of the specific Tanzania questions.
I mean, you left me with the right question. And I'll go directly to the last one, which was about security in Tanzania. In fact, when you're moving out of the capital, it's more secure. The capital is relatively less secure, but still the security the risk is very minimal. It's just restricted to very petty thefts, and for which you should take some basic precautions. As you move out of there in Dodoma, it's absolutely, it's very, very secure. And I think we covered something about payment delays. So yes, payment delays are there. And there are various steps which you can take. Of course, the formal ones are you collect PDC, post-dated checks. There is also insurance credit insurance in place. But what works most of the time is just a simple follow-up, making the party know that the payment is required to be done, just keeping the communication channels open does the trick most of the time. I mean, that's all, in case there is any other.
I guess something probably just to add on to that sort of, Banu, because this might be interesting for the overall audience, because I know you've done quite some work in the mining industry. Is there any extra insight you would give to someone looking to enter the mining sector in Tanzania?
So the mining sector is quite wide, and of course Tanzania is quite resource rich. There are various opportunities for consulting work within the mining, which can be started very quickly. And of course, Tanzania is also putting up for sale a lot of mining concessions, which may have a little longer lead time. But the opportunities are there. There is, I think, one more question on demand for local presence. I mean, I would suggest if you can please read the question.
Sure. So the question is, how much is the government interfering in business cases and demanding, for example, local presence? Main concern is IT solutions for passenger transport. We have seen in some cases that there is a very strong requirement to, for example, host software solutions locally, despite not too many options to actually do that from distance, as there doesn't seem to be local data center providers with proper interfaces for the purpose. So I think the question is, can IT solutions be hosted remotely or over a cloud? And you know, what are, and perhaps maybe what is the local the infrastructure available? And Banu, do you have any insights to add to that? If not, we can revert back with some more details.
I think I would revert back with more details on this one.
So I guess I can jump in there quickly, because the first part of the question is about, it seems like almost like hiring locally and local content. So what you are slowly starting to see, not only in Tanzania, but across East Africa, just due to high unemployment rates, is just the employment of sort of local personnel, and that's really important. But particularly what you can sort of point out that was actually signed last week is that there's actually easy movement, well, of course, within the East African community, but now Kenyans and Tanzanians can cross borders and begin working immediately rather than actually having to get visas between that. So there are options, but the government is going to put a heavy emphasis, if you are looking for talent, to look locally first. After a period of time, usually the job description, the position has to be posted for 3 months. And then there has to be sort of a number of questions you need to answer from the immigration authorities, sort of what are the steps you took to find local talent. And then you can look at sort of if that's not being fulfilled. And then, of course, you can look abroad for those solutions. Tanzania, what we said earlier, is sort of a crossroads of Eastern and Southern Africa. So you actually do have quite a diversity of individuals who may be Tanzanian Kenyan or Tanzanian Rwandan. So there's quite a unique mix and diverse mix of individuals in Tanzania. So that was just my insight in regards to sort of the hiring locally and the local content perspective. Oh, and then just one more thing to add from the local content perspective. Yeah, it's important. A lot of things are sort of made in Swahili, or it's one of the things that it's sort of zeroed in on Tanzanian culture and related to it. it's a point where a number of these countries, particularly their cultures, languages, and particularly the local dialects, are slowly dying out. So the countries are putting in safeguards just to make sure not only protecting the talent, but also protecting the culture of these countries, just to sort of maintain their own national identity in this sort of increasing sort of globalized world. So that's it in regards to my response. Amyn, if you want to add anything onto that part, the question was asked, over to you.
There's nothing more to add. I think we'll just come back on the regulations around data centers, and we can address that topic offline.
Okay, fantastic. And then I guess I can add, one more bit in terms of data centers. You do see starting actually some strong investment, particularly in South Africa, for data centers to make sure the data remains on the continent. As you're probably aware of, the likes of Facebook and other sort of major tech-based companies tend to sort of prefer the data being kept within the vicinity of the United States. There is slowly starting to be investment in data centers and keeping those servers and that information held locally. To be honest, is there a vast amount of resources in that right now? No, but there are specific investors, primarily coming out of the European Union and the United States, that are looking to invest in it. So if you can find a particular investor, or you already have that cash available, there is a lot of opportunity. I would say this opportunity would particularly have to be sort of a slow buildup as countries become a lot more sort of ITC or sort of ICT sort of intelligent. And there are a lot more part of livelihoods are being digitized across the vast amount of population. But I would say if you're looking to invest in data centers, if you're able to build it locally, I can imagine there are going to be a lot of private sector partners, particularly international partners, that want to support that. And also you'd be actually playing a large part of national transformation agendas, not only in Tanzania, but across sort of other parts of sub-Saharan Africa, as governments pay a lot more attention to sort of the important growth of ICT and the development of their countries.
And I think just one other thing to add to what Andrew said is that there is a move in the, especially in the financial services space, to have data centers housed locally. So, and you know, countries like Uganda, for example, and I say this from an East African context, have passed a law whereby data centers, especially for the financial services industry, need to be housed locally, irrespective of the regional or international presence of the bank.
Great, thanks, Amyn. So we have some time for a few more questions. If we don't have any more that's come through the Q&A side, actually, there's a question I would like to ask you, Banu, for those who might be sort of a question shy, is from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest challenge to actually starting a business in Tanzania for somebody coming from the likes of Estonia and the European Union? So over to you, Banu.
Thank you, Andrew. So I think the potential is there. However, to just start a company and get it going, it may take more time. To get the right people, import the right people or the right talent may take more time. So that's it. Just the starting part is what is the struggle, which is only time which it might take. But once it gets going, the ability to transform your idea into reality can be done very fast in Tanzania, because the population is very adaptive of new things which are coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you, Banu.
So they basically embrace the change very easily, but you need to cut through the bureaucracy and get yourself started.
Thank you for that insight, Banu. Amyn, do you have any comments in regards to that question raised?
No, Andrew, I don't.
Okay.
Nothing more to add from what Banu has said.
Okay, thanks, guys. And then another question, I just want to hand this over to Amyn, is in terms, you talk about agriculture and agricultural value-add products. And you mentioned avocado oil. If you could just provide a little bit more context into that, because as of course we know at Stepchange Africa that these sort of value add products in agricultural space, there's a lot of demand, particularly in the European Union and also of course North America. So if you could just provide a little bit more insight to that, sort of how sort of you can leverage sort of the brilliant sort of opportunities in Tanzania to sort of build out like an export market.
For sure. Look, the Tanzanian agriculture industry, as I mentioned, is growing. The country has tracts of arable and fertile land, so that presents opportunity for the growth of various agriculture commodities. Now, due to the fertile nature of the land, there is an opportunity to, for example, to grow avocados and to scale avocados. Now, one of the things that one might not be aware of is some of the variants of avocados aren't transportable, or rather don't have long shelf lives, if I can put it that way. So what are some of the ways that we can actually tap into that industry and actually export Tanzania's agriculture outputs? And that comes in the form of value addition. So, extracting the avocado oil, which is a large growing market, not only in the European Union, but also in North America, and really adding value to the Tanzanian crop. Another thing to also note is that most of the agriculture commodities that are products that are grown in Tanzania are organic, quote unquote, as fertilizers and so forth are very rarely used. That being said, with very minimal work, the agriculture products can be certified as organic, as well as as any value addition that's done on these products, and there's that opens up a larger population, rather a larger market, and returns on value addition, especially with organically certified value addition, are a lot higher than just exporting the commodity. So I hope that answers the question, Andrew.
Yeah, no, that was very good. Thank you for that, Amyn. And I see that another question just sort of popped up in the chat function. I'm not sure if Amyn, if you could take a look at that.
Yeah, for sure. Just give me a second. It's could SaaS solutions be a potentially valid business model, or is software expected to be purchased and on their balance sheet for a feeling of own and control?
Okay, so I can take sort of the first part of it, and then Amyn sort of course add on to it. Yes, for SaaS-based products, yeah, there's a huge opportunity. As said before, it's a key part of government transformation agendas and investment in ICT. And particularly what you're seeing, the development of sort of SaaS-based products is really from a B2B perspective, of course, because a lot of these sort of legacy institutions, whether it's the financial services or fast-moving consumer goods, they're mainly sort of using outdated services, so much so they could possibly be still using pen and paper. And in terms of the financial services, they're still using sort of archaic systems that sort of probably been outdated in the European Union, probably at least for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. So that shows you where these types of opportunities are. Particularly if you guys are aware of Y Combinator. Y Combinator is one of the most sort of prolific sort of launch pads, I would say accelerators in the world. So I think they've had 27 companies that have become unicorns since they've existed. And they've actually been heavily investing in SaaS-based products, particularly coming out of Kenya. So with that being said, there is definitely an opportunity for it. Within Tanzania, the whole entire ICT industry, as we pointed out, is really, it's much a sleeping giant. You're not getting very sort of strong development. It's usually around sort of the agricultural part. So you would probably be operating sort of more in a sandbox and have a little bit more opportunity building your SaaS product. But I would say probably the longer term side of things is probably the bigger opportunity, particularly working with the corporates and seeing Nairobi is actually the sort of the hub in terms of business activities for the whole entire sort of East African region. You might have a little bit more success there. Then also in terms of building out your product, if it's not already established, or even if it is established, of looking for that further sort of growth capital. Of course, you're going to look in Estonia, and you're going to look across Europe too. But if you're looking for sort of that sort of catalyst in terms of growth capital, building out your products there, or maybe just using it as simple sort of a sales outlet, Nairobi is where that sort of the cash is available for it. Of course, you can approach sort of local institutions for that, but if you're looking for that sort of venture catalyst sort of bump with it, you would have to look at Nairobi. It's sort of Nairobi just a little bit more dynamic compared to what you're seeing in Tanzania. But with Tanzania, you do have the regional offices of all sort of the major brands that are operating into East Africa. So there's plenty of opportunity for SaaS-based products. If you want us to go further into detail, we're happy to speak to you at length separately of this and sort of take it sort of step by step, sort of pinpointing that for you. So I believe that answers probably about 3/4 of that question. I'm not sure, Amyn, if you have anything to add.
No, I don't. Thanks, Andrew, for that.
Okay, perfect. And then would say I'm just going to offer sort of one last question before we sort of wrap up and sort of start giving out the key context and sort of next steps. And this is something that we've sort of touched upon sort of briefly so far, is looking at the tourism and hospitality industry. So tourism and hospitality is one of the biggest forex earners for the country. It's also, as Banu sort of appropriately mentioned, with the Serengeti and the tropical paradise that is Zanzibar and the other Spice Islands. There's still a lot of opportunity for investment. I think it would be sort of not very smart if we don't sort of briefly touch upon that. So, Amyn, from your perspective, because I know your family's involved in the hospitality industry, is there something you see particularly special about the tourism industry in Tanzania, and where do you think there's sort of gaps for investment to be made?
Look, there are a lot of opportunities in terms of the hospitality industry in Tanzania. The natural beauty of the country is unparalleled, and I think the Spice Islands, for example, such as Zanzibar, and is probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. That being said, I think there's an opportunity for boutique tourism and more targeted tourism, if I can put it to you that way, whereby individuals can rather groups can connect tourists with local residents to actually visit the country in a more and get a more local and real perspective. So as opposed to some of the more commercial tourism that we're seeing now with the large global international brands coming in. So that's one area that I see, but there's always opportunity, and as the government invests more into tourism, there's considerable growth that one can tap into.
Perfect. Thanks, Amyn. And then just something to add on to what Amyn says. Also, what we're seeing at Stepchange Africa is seeing a lot more interesting golf tourism. I know that may sound a bit odd, but not only in Tanzania, but across East Africa, there's a focus on sports tourism, and particularly since there's large swaths of land that are sort of underdeveloped, that people are looking at sort of golf as a particular area. So it's one of the things, if you are an avid golfer and that's something you're particularly interested, that's an opportunity that actually numerous African countries are actually talking about. The other thing that we're seeing is the sort of development of ecotourism. Of course, when you do attend sort of national parks or other sort of wildlife sanctuaries, it's sort of you leave footprints and you take memories. And it's something that a lot of African countries are particularly seeing within the sort of with climate change and sort of with still challenges of poaching and other sort of wildlife challenges, that people are focusing on how do we preserve the environment and also how do we preserve wildlife too. So if you're looking to sort of build up some more ecotourism or adventure tourism opportunities, that's something that would be sort of warmly welcomed by not only the Tanzanian Wildlife Federation, but also other sort of countries in East Africa that are home to the likes of the Big Five for it. So I would say that's going to be the end of our question and answer period. So I just want to say thank you to Banu and thank you to Amyn. And now we're just going to sort of head on to the second, well, the last sort of wrap up part of today. So in terms of what's the next step. So if you attend the previous webinars, this probably looks quite familiar. This is your first time. Let's sort of take you through it, but also let's rehash it for who was here earlier. So said before, this is the last of a 3-part webinar series. We previously did webinars in Kenya and Tanzania. As Manu said, each country is particularly unique with their own cultures, customs, and also opportunities. So Tonis will say sort of as I wrap up where you can actually find sort of where you can sort of rewatch those webinars so you can pick up all the information if you didn't attend them earlier too. The second thing is do your research. As Manu said, there's nothing better than a Google research just to get some basic information to decide sort of what are the real opportunities or some of the opportunities that are there. But of course, Google is only good for about that first 5% of your whole entire journey of actually finding out, is this right for me? And this is the right market for my business. So of course, reach out. So reach out to us at Stepchange Africa, reach out to our counterparts at ALCPA, Banu, and also the fellow managing partner at Cash. We have a large swath of network and also experience or on the ground. And we'll be able to tell you sort of what's right, what's wrong, and basically how can you sort of expedite and capitalize on your investments. And then last but not least, and then something that Tonis and I were discussing before we jumped in today's webinar, there's nothing better than actually visiting the country itself. It's an opportunity for you to put things into perspective. It's an opportunity for you to see if this is a place I want to do business. It's an opportunity to think if there's a future for you. Because what we highly recommend at Stepchange Africa is when you want to make an minimal investment for 3 years. If you're not making forward progress after 3 years, then it's probably time to pivot and adapt. But with doing business in sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, not only Tanzania, you have to make that long-term commitment. And if you sort of do foresee that long-term commitment, there's a lot more opportunity at the end of the tunnel. And then, so we gave you the action steps. Now who are you going to call? Well, these are a list of key organizations to reach out to. These range from various government authorities to members of the EU delegation. Just going to point at the EU delegation, for example, is home to a lot of economic research. They invest in a lot of key areas of the Tanzanian government and structures that affect sort of the business growth environment and the development of SMEs. So it's a huge resource, so don't bypass that. And also to point out, as you're looking to enter into the country, it's always used to sort of tap into innovation hubs and co-working spaces. They do a lot of events. I know it's COVID right now, but they do a whole host of events. They offer very affordable workspace, so the likes of Seed Space and the 17 other ones that we've mentioned provide a lot of opportunity for you to give sort of a temporary home as you try to figure out what's next. And then last but not least, there are a series of European business groups, not only active in sort of Tanzania, but across East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and actually the world as well. So don't be afraid to use them as also a port of call. They are usually combined with sort of particularly individuals that have been in country in Tanzania, for example, for sometimes 20, 30, 40 years. So these are sort of fantastic groups to network and also sort of just get a better lay of the land. So they have great third party in addition to the likes of Stepchange and ALCPA. And then just one last bit. So once again, we're Stepchange Africa. We're happy sort of to help you connect bridges between Estonia and East Africa. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Also, I'm going to hand it over to Tonis right now and say, don't be afraid to contact him as well. And Enterprise Estonia is a fantastic resource of information. And they're the ones that we've been working diligently together to put on, hopefully what you found was a very helpful 3-part series. So that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Tonis.
Thank you, Andrea. I couldn't say it better as you did, so thank you very much. And also thank you, Amyn, thank you, Panu, for being with us today and giving the overview of how to do business in Tanzania and also in East Africa. Asante sana. I would also like to thank everyone who joined our East African webinar series. The materials, as said, will be uploaded to Enterprise Estonia channels, so you can find them there. And of course, please contact us if you have any questions. So thank you once again, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.